Hello everybody on the DeadMenRofl channel. You are joined tonight by your host Alex, who is on his own because I have decided to bring back a series that me and Joe started quite a while ago, which was Racing with Alex. This is becoming apparent because of the recent news of the sequel of one of my favourite racing games of all time, which just happens to be Grid 2. Now, I have seen some director's commentaries of the game, which I think appeared on IGN or Machinima. I just know they appeared on my feed, and for some reason I can't seem to find them again. I don't know why, they just seem to have disappeared. So I'm sorry, I would normally post the links below, but they just seem to have disappeared. I'm very sorry about that. Now, of what I did see, I saw some quite interesting features that are coming to the game, which seems really cool and not really tried before. One of these features is a new game mode called Live Routes or Dynamic Route, one of the two, where basically it's their way of doing an open world city race style, like in the Need for Speeds of old and stuff like that, except it doesn't have a set route. It can literally go through any corner in the city, start anywhere in the city. So there is literally millions of combinations of race circuits. All it knows is the distance of the track and the race, and that's it. It will decide itself throughout the race what it's going to do, which I think is really interesting because it means you have to be completely on the money the entire time. And they've also attempted to set up the AI in a similar way to how you would think of the race, because the route is going to be changing throughout the race. It's like the route doesn't know what it's going to do until you get close to the corner, or whatever the first car is going to be doing, getting close to the corner. So I think that's quite interesting because you really got to be on your toes the entire time, and the AI do as well, because they could be spinning out because they've gone through too fast, or like slightly tapping walls and stuff like that. And I quite like that. It's interesting. I feel quite excited about that. Another thing that has been released, or another video I saw anyway, was of high downforce racing. This was in a Volvo S60 or C60, one of the two, and a Volkswagen Scirocco. And I saw the race and that they did, and they were saying why they had chosen to make the AI quite aggressive in nature. I have some slight issues with that, plainly because the whole point of how high downforce racing is you're using the air to create downforce, which gives you more grip so you can go through the corners faster. If you're really racing that kind of style in real life, you wouldn't want to compromise the aerodynamics much, because it will make you slower. And the drivers seemed quite aggressive, and it just seemed like they didn't quite care so much about the car. It's like, obviously I can tell like it was like a little bit of bashing, but like tiny amounts. But I don't know, it seemed a little too aggressive for my liking, for what this kind of drivers should be looking for. It's like if you see in Formula 1, if there's a crash, or if they get like mostly slight damage on the front wing or a part of the car, well, most of the front wing, they will come in and change it, unless there's no reason to change it due to there's no real change in lap time. And it's like they want to try and keep their cars intact, because then they have the best balance, because they've optimized it over the weekend. Whereas if you are a bit too aggressive, then you will most likely cause damage to your car, and that will compromise you in the race later on due to a lack of speed. And yeah, I wasn't quite happy with that kind of feature, and I hope it's not as aggressive as I think it might be, because otherwise it's just gonna ruin the racing really, and it wouldn't feel more to real life, and I'm not quite liking that. Another bit is the top of the line cars are in this game, like in the original game, such as like the new McLaren MP412C, KTM Crossbow. I believe the Aero Atom's in there as well, or the V8 version anyway, hopefully, and stuff like that, like very top of the line cars, and I'm quite enjoying that. I'm hoping they've got Le Mans in there again, because that was one of my favourite features in the first game was Le Mans. It was just brilliant for me. I'm hoping they got that kind of feature in there. I haven't seen any videos saying that it's there, so I don't know. It's just my hopes, really. But it's good to see they've got the top line of the cars again, and it should give some good tight racing that's similar to real life, and I think I'm going to enjoy that. Now, drifting in this game, which I'm glad they brought back because I did enjoy the drifting in the first game, is a slightly different format. And to be honest, it actually brings me all the way back to the time when I used to play Need for Speed Underground 2 on the GameCube. Yes, the GameCube, people. On that, the drifting was done on the open world map that you had, but on a set route, obviously. And it was usually downhill drifts if you were doing it. Which, of the videos I saw, they were only doing downhill drifts, but much shorter. It's kind of like the Pro Tour routes that you had in the first game, but much shorter, and you're not having to do 2 runs on them. I think that's quite good, and because the only problem I had with the original game on the drifting was when it was a drift battle, it was usually over a flat circuit, and like with circuits, I'm not so sure. That's not really my type. Because I'm a circuit racer, I usually want to go and not try and drift. I just didn't feel right. Whereas with a downhill track, I feel more that it should be a drifting circuit, so I think I might enjoy that a bit more. And I'm quite happy they've gone down that route, because it's just, everyone knows that you want to do a downhill drift if you're going to do drifting. It's just more fun, you get more momentum, and the car just is easier to drift, and it's just nicer. Now, one thing I'm definitely hoping is that they will have, and it looks like it, that they're going to have a similar multiplayer experience that they had in the first game, which is fantastic, because that is one of the main reasons I played that game, because the multiplayer was amazing. The multiplayer in the first game was very interactive, and the fact that it was a very short time between races, the races were usually quite short, so it was a bit punchy and nice. And the lobbies usually had a championship in the lobby for about 5 races or so, and you get experience points on where you came at the end of that time. Even if you joined late, you still got some experience points, which was quite nice. The thing I loved about that is that you could just mess about with your mates, and it was just so much fun. It's like they had a similar experience really on Dirt 2, which I loved a lot. I loved Dirt 2. It was brilliant multiplayer, and I'm just quite happy. It seems like they're wanting to go down a similar route, which makes me feel very, very happy. Now, I've kind of gone over all the stuff I wanted to talk about Grid 2, and I now want to talk about why Grid 1, well, Race Driver Grid anyway, is probably my favourite racing game of all time. And these are the main reasons why. The racing was very archaic. I loved that. Because at the time, like, you had Forza 2 coming out at the same time, and you had Gran Turismo 4, and I think it's also just stuff like that, and they were all very trying to be as realistic as possible. I felt Grid was a bit of a happy medium. It was trying to be realistic in a way, like with the cars and the relative speeds and stuff like that, but it still felt archaic. It just felt like you can just throw a car in and it will roughly stick to the ground, and if you got damage, it wasn't too bad, and it was nice. I liked that feature because it allowed you to recover from mistakes, which is quite nice, because not many people will know that when you may know, but when you're actually driving a racing game, much harder than it is in real life, because you have no feel whatsoever for the car, which is why when people have done the Gran Turismo Challenge and gone into racing to Le Mans with the Nissan GTR team, the gamers usually did better than the real life drivers, because they got used to driving the cars in a gaming experience where they've not been able to feel the car at all. So suddenly they're put in a real car, and they just know what to do, and they can react even faster because they know when they're losing grip faster than the actual drivers, because they've had the experience on the game of having to try and guess when it's losing grip. So it was quite a happy medium to have it a bit archaic, because you could just throw it in. It was just fun. There was a lovely range of cars in the game, going all the way from like Porsches to like the Audi R10 TDI, which was the Le Mans car at the time, which did like 260 miles an hour. I'm not sure if that was the actual speed it did. I'm pretty sure it was, but they were quickly restricted after that year anyway. And it was like you went all the way. You even had Demolition Derby in the game, so like that was the ultimate game on live. It was pretty much because everyone just did it, because you just like, fuck it, just go into every single corner and just try and take out as many people as you can and just carry on, because that's what Demolition Derby is. You just try. You're not caring about your car whatsoever, and it was just quite nice to do that. As well, the ways that the circuits were set up was that there'd be a couple of places normally in the race where you would have cars coming from two directions, like from different points on the circuit, and just crisscrossing, so basically making a figure-8 pattern. And it was quite dicey when you like just looking at the mini-map to make sure you're timing it right as you're going over a jump or going across an intersection, to ensure that you're not hitting another car. And that was just quite fun. So also one thing I did like about it was that it had open wheel events, which, like Forza 2, I quite enjoyed at the time. I never actually played Gran Turismo 4 because I never had a PlayStation or anything like that. Well, I had a PlayStation 2, but I didn't have a PlayStation 3, so I never really got into those games. But when I first got my Xbox, I did get Forza 2, and I spent quite a lot of time playing on that. And a little disappointment I had with that game was that there was no open wheel racing, and it was just all GT racing. It's like GT racing is fun to an extent, but you just want to feel like a bit more grip. You just want to go through corner a bit faster, but you can't really do that in a GT car because it's not got as high downforce. It's not as easy to control, or not easy to control, but not as it doesn't handle as well, and it was just kind of got frustrating after a while when you're just stuck with GT cars. One thing I did love on Forza 2 was the fact you could upgrade your cars over time, but then sometimes, like when I was younger, I had no idea what I was doing in those cases and just completely ruined cars. Times I think I had a TBR Carrera Speed 12, I just took it to like 1,100 horsepower or something, and then it was completely undrivable because the suspension and the actual handling of the car was awful compared to the power of the engine, and it was just undrivable. And those were the only problems I had with that, because I just didn't. It wasn't the game's fault; it was my own fault. I just didn't know what I was doing. But I did miss having open wheel, because I'd spent a lot of time playing like F1 games on the previous consoles, and I got used to driving open wheel cars, and I was also driving go-karts at the time, which is effectively a small open wheel car. So I was kind of wishing it was there, but it wasn't. And then as soon as I played Grid 2 and realised it was there, it's like, oh, I'm so playing that game mode, which is what I did. Now, also, it was also one of the first games where I actually saw a flashback system, which was good because it meant that novice drivers could get away with making a mistake, which was nice, because especially when you're trying to learn a game. So it's like now, like whenever I play it on ninja difficulty, so I have no flashbacks, and it's on the hardest difficulty, so I'm usually trying to go all out, and if I make a mistake I just deal with it and just keep going. But in the time when you're trying to learn the track and the game and how it all handles, it is nice to have a flashback system, which they did introduce into Dirt 2 afterwards, and then EA started copying it for Need for Speed Shift and stuff, and Shift 2, even though I didn't really think it worked as well as the Codemasters version. But I'm not going to go into how I don't like EA, because I think I could be here all day. I don't want to be here all day. But yeah, like the flashback system I really enjoyed, and I'm glad it had it, because it meant like even my brother, who doesn't really play racing games that often, it meant he actually got quite good at the game because of the flashback systems. And if he made a mistake, he could then go back a few seconds and then not make that mistake again in that corner, and it was quite nice. I I thought it was a very good feature for novice drivers and not people who've been driving on racing games for a long time, and I'm happy with that. Also, had one of the most fun multiplayer experiences I've ever seen, which is glad I've already touched on that. And also, it did have a certain degree of dynamic damage on it. When I say certain degrees, like you could see body parts of the car flying off if you had an accident and stuff like that, which was quite nice to see, because Forza 2 did have a similar thing to that, but the problem was with it actually did cause your car to go slow. It actually did affect the aerodynamics in a way, and like your engine did get damaged and stuff like that, which was kind of annoying more than anything else, especially like if someone had crashed into you, and it was just annoying. Especially for the endurance races, because then you have to live with it for the rest of the race. And yeah, whereas with Grid, it didn't, like, the damage that actually happened to the bodywork, it didn't actually really affect the performance of the car at all, which, like, in a way is bad, but it was a bit archaic. It was a bit more fun. It wasn't supposed to be as serious as those games, although it did have some other good damage features. Whereas you could damage wheels, you could damage your engine, you could damage your transmission, and you could also damage suspension, which was quite interesting, especially if you really damaged them, because then you get massive torque steer every time, and the car would become undrivable. But then you'd have to do something rather major to actually cause that much damage on your car that you'd actually get massive torque steer. Also, another thing that I quite liked about the campaign was the fact that you created your own team, and so you had custom liveries and you had your own team. Now you had custom sponsors. That was just fun, and it was like it gave a little bit of element of competition for it, which was quite nice. Which is something I felt it needed. Like, you even had your own teammate that you could hire. You could fire him if you wanted. The only problem with that is I found with the teammates is that they were never as good as you. Which is kind of, it's like you could like come first in races, you get all the sponsor bonus from it, and then they could come fifth or something, and they get like 3 or 4 if you had set it up for like the top 3 kind of thing for your sponsors. And it just kind of annoyed me slightly, because it just prolonged a little bit on what cars you could get in the future, and it's a little annoying. It's like I quickly did fire my first teammate because he was pretty rubbish, and got the most expensive guy I could get because he was literally the best teammate in the game. And he did a good job, but there was always the occasional races where they weren't quite up there, especially on open wheel. That was like when it was completely my forte, and they were like miles down, and it was like, oh, it was just a little annoying. But yeah, it's like I wish the teammates had been slightly better, or if you could at least have got the best drivers in the game, because you could get the best drivers in the game to a certain extent, but you couldn't get like the Raven West crew, which was the people that you were main rivals in the game, which you always had competitions against every time you finished an area. And yeah, I do wish you could have got one of them, because they were much better drivers. Oh well, that's all in the past now. Exactly 5 years in the past. Now, I'm going to go through the problems with Grid 1. No one really plays live anymore on it, which is a bit annoying. So if you, like, for example, I haven't got some of the achievements on live because I didn't really care about it at the time, and like I kind of got to the point, it's like I just want to complete the game because I play it so much. It's one of my favourite games. It's like it'd be silly me not to, but I can't really now because not many people play the live, and it's very difficult to find a match. Also, there was one achievement in the game which was supposed to be patched but wasn't, which is actually completely impossible to get, which annoys the hell out of me. And that is the Jack of all trades, which is to drive every single car in the game. And there was originally 45 cars in the game, 2 of them being Ferraris, but then Ferrari pulled out a few days or weeks before the launch of the game, and didn't give Codemasters a chance to actually change the achievement to only 43 cars. So you could get all the way up to 43 cars, and then you couldn't do it anymore. And the problem they had after that was that they were also bringing out Dirt 2 around a similar time, and they also won the rights to the F1 games. This meant they just didn't have time to patch the achievement, or the money, to be honest, because it's quite expensive to send a patch through to Microsoft to put on the game. So I think it's like £25,000 or dollars or something like that, which is quite a lot of money for a small studio, because they were relatively small at the time, because it was only Codemasters Birmingham, it wasn't the entire Codemasters company. And which also meant that they didn't bring out the 3 DLCs that they were planning to, because they just didn't have time because they were working on the F1 game. They managed to bring out the first one, which was the 8-ball pack, which I actually do have. And to be honest, the cards in that, yeah, some of them were good. It's like others were just a bit heavy and just didn't quite agree with them. But then they did bring out the second expansion pack on, expansion car pack anyway, on the PlayStation. But of course, I have an Xbox, so I never got that. Although, yeah, so that kind of annoys me because it's only a 10G achievement, I believe. Oh no, wait, it might be a 30G achievement actually. I'll put that in a comment. But that did annoy me. Okay, also the damage physics were a little off on the game, as I said before, which is kind of a thing that I kind of liked, was the fact that with the actual aerodynamics, it didn't affect it whatsoever, which I'm fine with that. It was a bit archaic. But also, when you did go, they didn't clear the damage of other cars during the race, because they're always so short, they just didn't bother, like they didn't disappear. So you could just suddenly come around to a corner where there'd been a big accident the lap before, and you've got loads of carbon fibre everywhere, yet you can go straight over them completely fine. You would like get thrown up in the air sometimes if it was a big piece, but you wouldn't get a puncture or anything like that, and you wouldn't get any serious damage from it, which was a bit off and a bit odd in a way. But I guess because I didn't have any pit lanes or anything on the game, it would probably make sense. So if they had like a pit lane in some of the races that are actually on circuits, then they may have put the punches in, and if they had put the punches in, I can understand it, but it would just be a little annoying. I guess it probably would annoy gamers in the future more than if they hadn't put it in. Now, you could also cut corners quite easily in that game because there was no penalty for doing it, and it was just a little annoying. Like if you're trying to go for like a really fast time around the track, and then suddenly you're trying to stick to the limits of the circuit, and you just see like the first person in the world's Ghost just completely cutting every single corner pretty much, and just like ugh. It's like you'll probably see from some of the racing in the background video that I cut corners a bit more than you would normally, but then in fairness, most of the AI follow me as well, so it's not really much of an issue. I did try to keep to the limits of the circuit that the AI also keep to, so that the times will at least be a bit more consistent, a bit more realistic. Because I don't like cutting corners because I'm a circuit racer. I'm actually a real racer driver. I want to stay to the limits of the track. Thing I did find was the cars were a bit too easy to control, because the traction control system they had in the game, and also the ABS system that they had, was a bit limited, and like you definitely felt it when it was on. It's like you could get much better starts and stuff like that, but when you actually, after that, it didn't really make much of a difference, and I just felt that was just a little annoying. So I would have felt like I wanted to actually have to limit how much throttle I was putting in, rather than just go full throttle and you'll be fine as long as you steer in the right way. I just felt that was a little annoying. Also, one of my friends at uni actually mentioned quite a good point of why I didn't really like the game. It's because he used to play on a controller, and especially on some circuits it was a bit understeery, so that means basically the car will just run wide when you're on full lock and stuff like that, and it just gets a bit annoying, which I found on the Le Mans circuit, that when you're going through the last sequence of corners on manual, you can go through them pretty easy by just flicking down a gear, whereas in the thing you actually had to brake and let, when you're on automatic, and let it go down the gear for you, and you just lost so much time. The AI caught up so quickly that it was just ridiculously annoying, and you could never get a fast lap. Also, locking up of brakes on that game didn't really do anything. You got a big puff of white smoke, but the speed just fell at the same rate that it normally would, and it didn't really matter. So, as anyone would do, you lock the brakes all the time, because you might as well you're braking as hard as you possibly can, and it's not damaging your car or anything in that way, so you might as well, which is a little off really. Also, I found the difficulty, it's kind of odd for me to want a game to be slightly harder, because like in some of the races, like, I think one of the races I got in here, I come third after starting 12th on Ninja difficulty. In fairness, that is in GT1 cars, so I'm not that great with them. And it seems like really, like if you're starting 12th in a real race, you wouldn't, and after 3 laps, you wouldn't expect to be in third, unless it was like there had been a massive accident. So I just felt like the AI was a little bit too stupid in places, especially like, because I think the AI was set up in a way that they would go through corners and in a single file line to try and minimize accidents. And it also meant that people at the back, they started to just brake on apexes, which you'll probably see in the open wheel race. When you're going through it, there's one chicane where literally the cars just brake and just stop on an apex of a corner when you're trying to go through it at normal speed. It's very difficult to avoid them, and you do get quite a lot of damage accumulated from that. And I did find that a bit annoying, because if you were trying to go for a clean race and then suddenly everyone's just stopped on an apex of a corner, it just pissed me off. And then of course you want to restart the race because you haven't got a clean race. And I think my final point I want to make is that the races weren't really long enough in the campaign. Yes, you could do race days, so you could increase the length of the races to, I think it was, I can't remember the limit of the race laps, I think it was 30 or something, which is a decent long race. But I'm kind of race, like on the F1 game, I usually do a full length race because I want to try and get consistent and stick with the pack and try to be consistently fast, because I always want to increase my racecraft. That's just who I am. And I just found that the races just being like 3 laps long was just a bit annoying. Like the only one that was actually long was the 24-hour Le Mans, which was only 12 minutes. And like that's only about 3.5 laps of the Le Mans circuit, which just, yeah, that was just a bit annoying to say the least. And I wish they had been a bit longer, maybe to like 5 laps or 6 laps or something, because I just felt like I would have been able to do it, just get more into a rhythm quicker and actually set better lap times. Well, I think that's pretty much the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll say thank you to the people who are still listening, considering getting close to half an hour in. And I shall leave you there and post in the comments any improvements you think I could make for these videos and how I could improve the channel. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and I would also like your feedback on how you lot are all thinking about feeling about Grid 2, because I am definitely excited. I've already pre-ordered it and I am definitely going to get it. So, and I'll hopefully bring out a video pretty quickly of me racing on Grid 2 and saying what I think of the game as it's fully finished. So please rate, comment, subscribe, and I will say ta-ra.